Welcome to a literal oval table, not round table, discussion about plant medicine. We are at the beautiful home of Plant Magic Café. I love Meg, all those known her as Meglen Richmond. She's a divine beauty goddess, heir to this planet, and she does ayahuasca journeys, she does San Pedro journeys, she does hape ceremonies, rituals, all right here sanctioned under her own public church heading. So it's really cool. They do have, I don't remember what it's called now, but on Sunday mornings, it's kind of a microdosing assisted ceremonies that they will do where you can come, you microdose yourself, you can come to a church ceremony. It's led by different cool speakers and spiritual guides and leaders. So please check out Plant Magic Cafe and Heart Quarters of Denver. So amazing coffee shop. That being said, I'm Somah. I'm here with some incredible women and each a pioneer in their own field. And the commonality is that, like myself, at a crossroads, what do I want to do next? How do I want to get there next? And every time I come to a crossroads, we call it that, you're the phoenix and you burn up and then you rise from the ashes and then you burn up. And every time I come back to a crossroads, what do? And as funny as this sounds, breath work, meditation, mindfulness. I look at what I'm eating. I look at who I'm hanging out with, who I'm literally having dinner with, who I'm going dancing with. And when I make that first snapshot of analysis of what's going on in my world, then I can go to my next steps. My teacher in India often says, don't go figuring out your life when you feel everything is a mess. That's when you sit down at your table of your different voices, your different technologies and tools, or different offerings to see what's going on in your heart. Because hopefully, as long as you have a pulse, you're going to hit a crossroads, at least every 7 years, at least, a certain period of time, because it's time to shift and change just like the seasons do. So plant medicine, when would we use plant medicine? What's plant medicine? We've talked about everything from ayahuasca, San Pedro, hape, cannabis, psilocybin. Ketamine has really taken a big view right now. A lot of people are using ketamine therapies, phenomenal treatments, really, really wonderful to see what it's done for PTSD, for some vets. I'm going to have Bree, who's here in the center here, speak to that in a moment as it relates to when perhaps psilocybin would be better, when ketamine would be better. But then we're going to talk about just some personal experiences and reasonings that we have felt or found that plant medicine might be best. Again, the common factor here is before I did any plant medicine, I worked with a teacher who made me study breath work first for 6 months. And if people who are here want to share their own personal experience of what they're planning or have done, that's their choice. But I will tell you that anytime I've exposed myself to plant medicine, I prepare it first with breath work. When I feel any sense of discomfort in the medicine in itself, I know at any time I can ground myself with the medicine, or I can let myself go with the medicine. And then when I come out of it, if I have any emotions, I know how to ground myself. Now, I would never advise doing deep psychoactive plant medicines without having somebody there with you. When you have a guide, when you have a support, if your mind goes to a space that you feel a loss of control, that person can help bring you back in. They will guide you with breathwork. They will guide you with Sanskrit mantra. They will get your emotions back on track, because that's what the plant medicine is for. It's not here to haunt you. It's not here to scare you. And as it brings up challenging situations, you learn under that guidance of the plant how to meet the challenge where it's at. So thank you for joining us. And I'm going to jump right into Bree. Bree, tell us, what would be the difference between somebody who wanted to, let's just jump into psilocybin versus ketamine, because those are the two most accessible. And then can you speak to your background on what we call the grandmother or ayahuasca? And I'm going to bring the camera in a little bit closer, and I'm going to be out of the camera, but I'll let you kind of.
All right, so yes, I'm trained in a Western medical model as a physician assistant. So I come from this world of a patient comes in, they have a problem, and you prescribe them, you memorize this algorithm of how to fix the problem that they come in with, and then they leave your office and you don't think about them again until they come back in. Plant medicine, and include this, I say plant medicine, but also including ketamine, it's a much different paradigm for treating. And I don't even like to use the word treatment, because what we're doing with all of this is we're unveiling what's within us, what's the root cause of these quote symptoms that we're having. So, in the past, and even whenever I first started studying with working with plant medicine, I had this idea of, okay, this one's good for this problem, and that one's good for that problem. But to me, and this is partially my personal journey with this, has been, what do you feel called to? If you have somebody that you really trust and they've talked about this experience and you felt really open to it, you got chills on your legs whenever they told you this story about psilocybin, or they went to this ketamine experience and they had this expansive, beautiful thought process during and after, and you think that feels like what might be a starting point for me. If you think this is going to fix it, then you need to backtrack and look at your starting point. So there's that I want to get out of the way first of all. But there are very practical differences between, let's say those two that you gave an example of. Ketamine is about an hour experience. It's usually given in a very medicalized setting. You're going to a medical office. You'll have vitals taken. There will be some sort of medical provider, like a physician assistant, nurse practitioner, doctor on staff. You'll usually be getting an injection or an IV infusion. You could be receiving a nasal supplement or nasal formulation, oral formulation, and going through this kind of almost like a procedure. In the beginning, you'll see once you get into the ketamine space, it's a very psychedelic experience. You're still accessing these other realms of consciousness and these thought patterns that you're looking for, versus psilocybin. Oftentimes you're seeing people eating a raw mushroom, and the experience can be anywhere from 4 hours bare minimum to maybe 6-8 hours. So time-wise, it's much different. Most of the time, the psilocybin experience won't be in such a medical setting. You'll be in somebody's home, you'll be in your own home, you may be in some sort of sacred journey space. Like for instance, Plant Magic has a sacred space upstairs that they host journeys in. So there's practical differences like that. And then I do feel like this is my personal experience, and from helping people, guiding people through both ketamine experiences and being a part of witnessing psilocybin experiences, the things that you're contacting within these journeys can be different. I always say ketamine is always higher consciousness. It's always vast and expansive, and you're enlarging your worldview. That may include some things, touching on nature or ancestry or spirit. Sometimes I have patients come through and say, ketamine never gives me a spiritual experience, but I feel like my neuroplasticity is increased and I can change my patterns. I show up to therapy differently. I show up in life a little bit differently. Versus in psilocybin, I don't know if I've ever been a part of a journey where somebody hasn't had this more embodied spiritual experience. I know that it happens, but oftentimes, and that is also because of the space that I hold, because I have a spiritual practice, and the people that I am around hold spirituality as a part of their life. So that's part of that as well. But I always, I say ketamine is expansive and wide and broad. Psilocybin is, but it's also in another way simultaneously very grounding. You're going into the earth. You're working with archetypes. If you're familiar with Carl Jung's work at all, he talks about universal consciousness and archetypes that are these themes, if you will, that hold true throughout time and space, and ancient wisdom and future wisdom. So psilocybin contacts you with something that's it's a little more grounding. You're going deeper. And I use these are my terms. So it's, I know that these are very broad and heady concepts to be discussing, but that's one difference, if you will, between the two of them.
Do you ever feel that there's a personality type that's more drawn to one versus another?
Mm.
Somebody who's more scientific mind, somebody who's been on medications longer,
Sure.
somebody who's got more potentiality of schizophrenia or bipolar right now is a common thing.
Mhm.
Is there ever a situation or is
Sure.
that case by case?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there is a difference, especially you mentioned the medications. Ketamine is one of the only substances that can be safe to use while you're on something like an antidepressant with an SSRI. Most people believe that it's not safe to combine psilocybin with SSRIs. Of course, you can find all sorts of information out there, so it's always best to consult with a physician, a medical provider, and touch in with your own inner wisdom on that. And there are lots of people that like the safety of going to a medical facility to receive something like ketamine, knowing that if something were to happen as far as blood pressure or some sort of medical emergency were to arise, it would be in this safe setting as far as the medical setting. Psilocybin, most of the time it's a very safe medication, but that is something that's different. Most of the time you aren't seeing people taking vitals before and after a psilocybin session. So that would be something. I do see people who like the protocol, they like the safety behind that. But then there's this other side, the psilocybin is very safe. So most people feel if they feel called to that, then they know that they're going to be in a safe space with that. I think
So
there's another part.
psilocybin isn't across the board something, I heard that somewhere that somebody had said that if you have schizophrenia in your family, it could
Right.
activate that more likely.
So yes, that is something that if you have a personal history with it, a family history of it, it's definitely something that you would need a really deep consultation about it, because and there's all sorts of theories
it's
about this as
dormant or
well,
whatever.
right? Yeah, so it's, in my personal opinion, I don't think that it will just like snap, give you schizophrenia. But if it's something that has, you have the propensity for that to be within you, and especially if you're going into these without preparation and integration, the things that can come up out of this could potentially cause that schizophrenia to be exacerbated. So it's absolutely, if there's any questions, it was something that you would need it.
It's almost like it's the fear in and of itself starts to create the potentiality for that. And that was funny because I was thinking about Geneva. We have Geneva here, who's been very instrumental in home births and being a midwife and developing, amazing programs. And I can't tell you how many times while she was doing a 200-hour yoga teacher training with me, and I would mention different people who were in this particular program, how many times, now I'm going to say this and she's going to chuckle because I know she's heard it way more. And they'd say, why on earth would you have a home birth when you can be born in a hospital nowadays? And I thought, oh my God, like, again, it's kind of like what Bernie is talking about, where some people just feel safer doing that ketamine session. But I've literally seen what they do, and they plug you into a machine. You sit in a room, you might have 5 people lying on a cot, you have blindfolds on, you have headphones on, you choose your music, they walk out the room, and they're probably watching your nostrils flare. They probably know exactly what's going on in your body at all times. But when I did my session, like I wasn't interested ever in doing ketamine. I only wanted to do plant medicine until I started to really study it. And then I only would do it in the environment that Brie offered, that they had, where it was like this fictitious kind of fake little girl's bedroom. And there was instruments on one side and things over on this other side. And I ended up just kind of laying it, would look like a doll's bed. But that setting was huge. And that's when you're looking at a home birth. People aren't just, I mean, they just popped out babies back in the day. But there's such a huge setting that Geneva would require. And there is preparation. And if you are prone, it's like, oh no, we don't have it. We have complications in our family. We have this, we have that. Then Geneva would probably have that on call in the backdrop ready, because that's your emotional samskara that you're bringing into this. So I'm not going to Brene yet, because Brene, I'm just going to say whether she'll tell her story, is the only one who has not experienced this in any way yet. Anything that you want to say on this matter of any version of psychoactive therapies, and we can come into ayahuasca. So you both have had, Lalani, am I at liberty to say you've had a background and you've had a ayahuasca journey? We can cut and edit this out if not. I had 2 journeys, and I had and 6 months apart, and my teacher required me to study holotropic breath work before I ever went into it, which is where I feel like some of Bree's interest as she's developing her own professional business. She really wants to incorporate more breath work. What would you say now, Leilani? Because you didn't have that whole background of what you've learned with Kriyas when you did this. Would have that been lovely to have had before you did your experience? Or how would you, let's have a little conversation about what ayahuasca is. Who wants to start?
I can share a little
Yeah.
bit, yeah, so, yeah, I hadn't had the tools before I went into it, so, it was quite a lot in terms of what was unveiling for me, what was within that needed to be seen. It's like a rock that was turned over that needed to be, so, so my process was a little bit the opposite, where I had the experience of ayahuasca, where I felt this immense feeling of unity and love, and this DMT experience is essentially is, so that was my first time. And then when you come into your daily life, you're like, oh, how did this bridge?
How do you ground that? How do you
Yeah.
integrate that?
And so after going to India and learning the Himalayan, Kriya, Kundalini, breath work, mantra, those tools just kind of, I was able to achieve similar states through this.
Do you feel like it helps you make more sense of the ayahuasca journey that you had? You can almost reflect back on it.
Yes,
So again, I said this is really cool because Bree's had more experience. She's had a personal background and had her own spiritual experience, but wants to dive more deeply into that because she's seen the connection. How would you say the difference of experience of ayahuasca is versus psilocybin?
Sure, yeah. So one important piece, especially whenever we're talking about, less about ketamine, but there's an aspect of this, but especially when you're talking about plant medicines, I want to mention the idea of indigenous reciprocity. So understanding that, that we as Westerners have this wisdom because of the indigenous population for generations upon generations that have used this, they've gone through these rites of passages and healings and initiations. Yeah, same here. And they pass it along through, through elders, through the community. And so that's part of the reason that I'm interested in this, is because I don't want to be the PA that just shows up and studies and then memorizes the algorithm. I want this hands-on, like fingers in the mud, digging through, going through these rites of initiation and passage to learn this wisdom and share it. So, and this is leading me to psilocybin absolutely has that. Ayahuasca absolutely has that. Ayahuasca really carries much, to me, it carries so much, I don't even know the word for it. I mean, it's truly, it's the grandmother, it's the mother medicine, where it will give you what you need, not what you want. And psilocybin can do that too, but ayahuasca really shows up with that. And it can be so beautiful, but for me, it's always been this very embodied experience. Like the last ayahuasca journey ceremony that I did have, most of the ceremony, I was going on a roller coaster ride of my own fear. And I knew it was scary because it was my fear, but somehow I knew that this was like the most immersive movie that I've ever been in. You feel like you're in it, and like that's your reality from here on out, but there's this really small part of you that understands this is being shown to me for a reason. And what I took from that is through the way that my mom died and the way that fear showed up in her life, my own mother was coming through, and then the archetype of the mother and the grandmother with ayahuasca was coming through and showing me, because I don't learn unless I learn the hard way, kind of, and I think a lot of people are like that. So showing me, this is what fear feels like, and then on the other side of that, that's what fear is keeping you from. You think you're safe from this.
Everything you want's on the other side of fear.
Yeah.
That's what we learned on a motorcycle at 18,000 feet.
Yeah, exactly. So, and psilocybin, It's also, I guess, a difference in personal experiences. I mean, I've met people that have done ayahuasca and they aren't really sure what to make of it, but they've had this really profound psilocybin experience. And I felt really called to go to ayahuasca. So there's, that's all in alignment for a reason, so.
And and the interesting piece, both, this last trip, you were there with your partner. And that was unique, and you said it created its own experience, because you had done it alone, and then you did this with your partner, and same thing, Lalani. You went off to India and you were with your partner, and people were coming up to you asking, what's this like to be going through some of these awakenings with a partner? Because it's very different, and now you're about to embark on a situation where he's gonna go do this on your own, and you're gonna deep dive yourself here, and that has its own interpretation. So, one more final piece in here I want to add in. So Brene, we haven't said much because you're embarking on your first journey this weekend, and taking a big step, and there was just, again, like what Bree said, it came up and all of a sudden it was a huge yes for you.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. It was always on, shall I say, the bucket list, but it's also an enhancement in my spirituality, that it's where I'm led to go right now.
That's beautiful. So when we do a follow-up, we'll have Brene sharing her before and after. Geneva, anything you want to contribute in this conversation? I don't even know what your background is or what you're at liberty to say, or with the environment that you have, because I know that you have children here in the building too, so sometimes we don't always tell them all of it. But again, do you have an opinion on any of this? Let me just say really quickly, I did learn about a situation and had a conversation actually with a medical specialist who feels that children should, we haven't talked about hape. Hape is this indigenous, again, amazing snuff tobacco, so much more than that. I really, if you have any interest or you've heard about this, come to Plant Magic and come do the ritual and have Megan take you through it and guide you in, through the ancestral way, or THC, cannabis. I was having this conversation with a medical professional sharing that children should have zero access to this until after the age of 25 because of what's happening in the brain. And I strongly, vehemently disagree. And much of it's come from ancestral wisdom. And I would say this wisdom was shut down when women were shut down with being able to have home births, and they would give babies and mothers small microdosing of different plant medicines to help guide them through different spirits. And then rather than having vaccinations and all these other crazy things growing up, the children were often given small microdoses of different plant medicines so that the prefrontal cortex never formed saying, you're weak, you're small, you're ugly, you're bad, you're dumb, they always had that connection to spirit and to God because they were in that environment that really encouraged that. And I feel like as a wisdom keeper, just to even keep home birth alive is amazing. But there was a story last year that had made news, and she was in, when they were trying to reverse some things with psilocybin in Colorado, because she was the baby who was stripped at birth from her parents because they were then thrown in jail for harming and abusing their child with drugs. And she was in the foster care system then forever and ended up having her own drama and abuse and violence. And all her parents were doing as part of their culture of doing these plant medicines. I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful if women were allowed to even do that and medicate themselves throughout that?
Yeah,
rather than
it's still a huge thing in birth, like in hospitals, if women say that they have used even like THC, they're not allowed to breastfeed until they go home, and they can have CPS called on them.
So they can have child protection services called on them for saying that they've had any form of THC in their system in this day and age, 2024.
Yeah.
That's really sad. I'm just gonna say, yeah. But you can have all the Vicodin in you that you want.
Right, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, pregnant people can get Zofran, which is proven to cause birth defects, and it's still prescribed all the time. But don't smoke weed.
Right. How does that make you feel, Bree? Because you're on that same side of that.
Right.
Like, that's part of what makes you frustrated, because nobody's here arguing about the benefits of the Western medicine in the
Right.
11th hour.
Right.
Wonderful. And
And like, I mean, Zofran for sure helps with nausea. But what about THC. Like we know that also helps with nausea, you know, so different parts of the conversation. And I guess the only thing that it has nothing to do with birth, but like, I think, you know, within this conversation, it's evident that like plant medicine is sacred medicine, but that like it is medicine. And that like so many people, now that like psilocybin is becoming more common, like I still just think people think of it as more like a party drug,
Yeah.
but that like it is sacred medicine. And like even tobacco, like tobacco is sacred medicine. It's not something that we're supposed to just be smoking on a cigarette break. Like it's a way to connect with the divine, and that it just should be used as such. And the same thing with birth, like people who haven't had a baby yet, like what we tell them, like if they've ever done psychedelic medicine, that like that's what it's most similar to is like a trip, you know.
Yeah, it's a trip.
And because there's all of these chemicals in your body that are doing things you've never felt before. But that it's like a sacred experience that you're gonna come out changed on the other side.
Plant medicine, giving birth, using psychoactive pranayama, allowing your body to go into deep dive meditation. What's the point of all of this? You're the teacher, you're the guru. Any guide or teacher that you work with should be shining a light as bright as this light shining back on us, on you. It's your path, it's your journey. And Hape is this wonderful indigenous, again, it's snuff, it's blown up your nose, or you can self-administer, and then you hold it in your body and you have your own personal experience. One of the things that Meg taught me was, you know, and then you do, like, you'll snap your fingers around your head after you do it, and you're waving away the spirits. And one of the reasons why we would use tobacco when people say, oh, I don't smoke, only when I drink, it's again, it's to draw away the spirits around that start to come in and more or less haunt what we call the samskaras in life. So I hope that you have, if nothing more, become more curious with the benefits of what cannabis really can do. I had a conversation with an astrologist just a day or two ago who said it absolutely lowers your vibration. It does this, it does that. And I can see in people's charts where it actually benefits them because their self-destructive behavior at a different time is so far much more toxic that cannabinoids are such an ingredient that when your body says, nope, you can't benefit from it, you actually automatically don't really want to have that. As long as you're doing your pranayama, as long as you're creating your set and setting, you're hanging out with people, watch the plant and how it invites you in. As Bree said, she was brought down to it, and Melanie had her own story with that. So thank you all for joining us, and I hope that you go find your next steps in the plants and see how they talk to you, and whether it's an essential oil that's your plant, whether it's a holotropic experience. Peace, love, keep it real, and sparkle on.